Hello, everyone. My name is Mark Bennett. I'm 32, and I own a mid-sized restaurant in Austin, Texas. It took me 10 years of sweat, debt, and sacrifice to build it from the ground up. When I say I built it myself, I mean every damn inch of it. I started washing dishes at 18, standing over industrial sinks with pruned fingers until 2 in the morning. Then I moved up to line cook, then chef, and finally, after years of saving, sleeping 4 hours a night, and maxing out every credit card I owned, I opened Bennett's Table. It's not a 5-star place, but it's solid. Good food, good people, good atmosphere. And more than anything, it's proof that I could make something of myself without a single handout from anyone, especially not from my stepmother, Cheryl. Cheryl came into my life when I was 14. She was 35 at the time, with bleached blonde hair, nails that clicked like castanets when she talked, and that kind of fake laugh that sounds like it was rehearsed. She married my dad, who was a quiet, hard-working man that ran a small HVAC business. My mom had died of cancer a few years earlier, and I think he was lonely, vulnerable even. Cheryl was flashy, loud, always networking, and she brought drama everywhere she went. My dad used to say she was just trying to make life a little brighter, but even at 14, I knew she was making life brighter only for herself. It started small. Designer purses, salon trips, ladies' lunches. Then came managing the finances, which was her polite way of saying she took control of all my dad's accounts. She convinced him she could handle things better. By the time I graduated college, she'd turned his savings into her spa fund. My dad defended her through everything. Whenever I said something, he'd sigh and tell me, "Mark, she's just trying to make things nice for everyone." But everyone always meant Cheryl. 2 years ago, my dad died suddenly from a heart attack. He was 59. The funeral was small, mostly close family, and a few of his co-workers who still called him Benny. Cheryl showed up late wearing a white dress that looked like something out of a magazine, diamond sunglasses, and heels that clicked loud enough to turn heads. She hugged people like she was the grieving widow in a movie. When it came time to talk about his estate, she gave me this rehearsed sigh and said, "There wasn't much left, honey. You know your father. He was always spending on work things." I didn't buy it. A few weeks later, I found out through one of his old employees that he'd had a life insurance policy. Guess who got all of it? I could have fought her. I could have hired a lawyer, dug into it. But I didn't. I already had my restaurant. I was tired, emotionally and financially, and I didn't want to spend another minute of my life chasing what she stole. So I let her have it. Let her rot in her marble bathroom or whatever she'd bought with his money. I hadn't spoken to her in almost a year when she suddenly called 3 weeks ago. I still remember the tone in her voice. "Mark, honey, I heard your restaurant's doing amazing. My friends and I are coming this Saturday. Make sure to save us your best table." It wasn't a request. It was an announcement. I didn't want to do it, but something in me thought maybe it would be good to show her what I'd built. To show her that while she was leeching off my dad, I was actually building something real. So I said, "Sure, Cheryl. I'll make sure you're taken care of." Saturday came. The place was packed. Saturday nights always are. But I made sure there was a table ready. Right in the middle of the restaurant, under the warm lights, perfect view of the kitchen. At exactly 7, Cheryl swept in with 7 of her friends, all women in their 40s and 50s, dripping in jewelry, perfume so thick it hit before they did. Cheryl gave me that fake smile and air-kissed my cheek. "Sweetheart, I'm so proud of you. I told everyone you're basically the Gordon Ramsay of Austin." I smiled through my teeth and said, "Glad you could make it." They ordered like there was no tomorrow. Appetizers for everyone, then more appetizers because these are just too good. They went through cocktails, bottles of wine that cost more than my first month's rent in Austin, entrees, desserts, and then decided to sample the after-dinner menu. They were laughing, clinking glasses, taking photos, tagging my restaurant online like they were celebrities. The table looked like something out of a royal banquet. Plates stacked high, glasses half full, a chaos of excess. When the bill came, it was just over $3,000. I printed it myself, walked over, and handed it to Cheryl with a polite smile. She glanced at it, then laughed. "Oh my God, don't be dramatic, we're family." I thought she was joking. She wasn't. She waved her hand dismissively and said, "Just charge it to me later, I'll Venmo you or whatever. You know I always take care of family." I said, "No, Cheryl. This isn't a favor. This is a business." She gave me that look, like I was being childish, and said, "Mark, you're not going to make a scene over dinner, right? You look so uptight. We're family, for God's sake." I could feel the eyes of my staff on me, the guests around us, the noise of the restaurant suddenly too quiet. I forced a smile and said, "Sure, I'll take care of it." She smiled like she'd won something, signed the check, and went back to laughing with her friends. But I didn't take care of it. The next day, around noon, 2 police officers walked into the restaurant. One of them asked, "Are you Mark Bennett?" I nodded, thinking maybe it was some kind of inspection or security issue. Then the officer said, "We received a complaint regarding unauthorized credit card charges from a Cheryl Bennett." I actually laughed out loud. I said, "You've got to be kidding me." They weren't. Cheryl had called the police and told them I'd used her card to charge her for a dinner she never authorized. I took them to my office, pulled up the security footage, and showed them the recording from the night before. There she was, Cheryl, laughing, signing the check, taking selfies with her friends, even bragging about my stepson's restaurant. The officers watched it, exchanged a look, and one of them said, "Looks pretty clear to us." They said they'd handle it, took a copy of the footage, and left. 2 hours later, my phone rang. Cheryl's voice was sharp enough to cut glass. "How dare you embarrass me like that? I told you I'd pay you later. Now I look like a criminal." I said, "You called the police, Cheryl. You made yourself look like that." She started yelling about family, about loyalty, about how I was ungrateful and vindictive. I told her I didn't owe her anything. She screamed something about how I'd regret this and hung up. For a few days, I thought that was the end of it. The restaurant went back to normal. My staff joked about the Beverly Hills dinner party, and I started to laugh it off. I figured she'd be too embarrassed to ever show her face again. I thought that was the end of it. I was wrong. A week after the police incident, when I finally thought things had settled down, I came into the restaurant early one morning, made myself a cup of coffee, and started going through the mail stacked on my desk. In between invoices and supplier statements was a thick, cream-colored envelope with a law firm's letterhead printed across the top. My stomach sank as soon as I saw the name Henderson and Marks, attorneys at law. I tore it open and started reading. The letter was from Cheryl's lawyer. According to her, I had caused her severe emotional distress, public humiliation, and defamation of character. She was threatening to sue me for irreparable harm to her social reputation. I actually laughed out loud, right there in my office. The idea that the woman who had tried to have me charged with credit card fraud was now claiming I had damaged her reputation was so absurd that I nearly spit out my coffee. But Cheryl had always been that kind of person. When manipulation failed, she escalated. When escalation failed, she played the victim. I'd seen her do it to my dad for years. Every time he tried to hold her accountable for anything, she would twist the story until she was the one who had been hurt. Now she was just running the same play on me. I wasn't intimidated. I called her bluff the same day. I put together every piece of evidence I had: security footage showing her signing the check and laughing, copies of the receipt with her signature, and written statements from two of my servers and the shift manager confirming everything that had happened. I attached it all to an email and sent it directly to the law firm. I kept the message short and professional, just stating that the allegations were entirely false, that I had proof of the transaction being legitimate, and that any continued harassment would result in a countersuit for false claims. 2 days later, I got an email from the same firm. The tone was polite, almost apologetic. They said they were no longer representing Cheryl Bennett and wished me the best. Translation: they had seen the evidence and wanted nothing to do with her circus. I felt a rush of satisfaction reading that. For a brief moment, I thought it was over for real this time. But Cheryl wasn't done. She couldn't stand losing, and she sure as hell couldn't stand being ignored. When she couldn't win legally, she moved to her favorite battleground, social media. Within a week, her Facebook page turned into a non-stop performance about how certain family members were greedy, ungrateful, and trying to destroy her life after the tragic loss of her husband. She wrote long, dramatic posts about how she had been betrayed by people she loved like her own children, and how grief had made her vulnerable to cruel treatment. She never mentioned me by name, but she didn't have to. Every relative, every old family friend, everyone who had ever seen us at a Christmas dinner knew exactly who she was talking about. At first, I ignored it. I figured anyone who knew me would see right through her act. But then the messages started. My cousin sent me a text saying that he'd seen Cheryl's posts and that it was messed up of me to take advantage of a grieving widow. My old neighbor, who hadn't spoken to me in years, commented on one of her posts with, "Wow, Mark, I didn't think you'd stoop that low." I started realizing how easily people believe a sob story when it's told loudly enough. Cheryl had spent years perfecting her image. Pictures of charity events, brunches, motivational quotes about resilience, selfies with captions about choosing peace after heartbreak. She looked like a woman who had rebuilt her life after tragedy. Nobody knew the truth behind that glossy facade. To them, she was a widow trying to move forward, not the manipulative parasite who had drained my father dry and tried to scam me out of thousands. The posts got worse. She started hinting that I had emotionally abused her and that I had taken advantage of her grief for financial gain. She even posted a photo from the night of the dinner, one of her selfies where she was smiling with a wine glass, captioned, "Even when the people you love hurt you, you have to stay strong." The comments were full of sympathy. "You deserve better. Some people show their true colors when money's involved. Stay positive, Queen." I wanted to scream. I had proof, solid, irrefutable proof, that everything she was saying was a lie. But I also knew how it would look if I fought back online. Nobody wins a Facebook war. You can't argue with someone who thrives on attention, especially not when their entire audience already wants to believe them. So I stayed quiet. I focused on my restaurant. I told myself that truth eventually wins. But then her little campaign started bleeding into my real life. A few of my suppliers mentioned that Cheryl had been calling around, telling people I was under investigation for fraud. One of my regular customers pulled me aside and said he'd heard family drama had gone public. I could feel the reputation I'd spent years building getting chipped away, piece by piece. My business depended on trust, and Cheryl was trying to poison it. The final straw came when my aunt, my dad's sister, one of the few relatives I still talk to, sent me a text late one evening. She wrote, "Mark, did you really call the cops on your stepmother?" That was it. No greeting, no context. Just that. I sat there staring at the screen for a full minute, feeling this wave of anger and disappointment. I thought of all the holidays we'd spent together, how she'd watched Cheryl manipulate my father, how she should have known better than anyone what kind of person Cheryl really was. I didn't even bother explaining. I just sent her the security footage, the full, unedited clip of Cheryl signing the check, laughing with her friends, and thanking the staff. Then I attached a copy of the police report that cleared me. I hit send and waited. An hour passed. Then 2. Then the entire night. My phone stayed silent. The next morning, I checked again. Still nothing. She never replied. Last night, I was closing up the restaurant after a long shift. The last of my staff had already left, and the place was quiet except for the hum of the refrigerator and the faint tapping of rain against the windows. I was sitting in my office finishing the day's reports when my phone buzzed. It was an email notification. At first, I ignored it, assuming it was just another order confirmation or vendor message. But when I glanced at the sender's name, I froze. It said Brenda H. The name sounded familiar, and then it hit me. Brenda had been one of Cheryl's friends at the infamous dinner. The one sitting across from her. The one with the oversized pearl necklace and the loud laugh that could cut through a crowded room. The subject line read, "Apology and clarification." I opened it. The first line made me blink in disbelief. Brenda was writing to apologize for everything that had happened that night. She said she hadn't known what really went on until recently. Apparently, Cheryl had told everyone at that dinner that the whole event was on the house, that I was hosting a special family appreciation night to celebrate my success and to treat the people who'd supported me. She claimed that Cheryl had told them she was helping me promote my restaurant and that the night was partially sponsored by some local vendors. According to Brenda, they genuinely believed they weren't supposed to pay for any of it. Reading that email made my blood run cold. For weeks I had been angry at Cheryl's friends for being part of that circus, for laughing at my staff, for treating my restaurant like their personal playground. And now I realized they had no idea. Cheryl had lied to them, just like she'd lied to everyone else in her life. She had created a story so convincing that her friends didn't even question it. Brenda said she felt awful when she learned the truth. She explained that she'd only found out after seeing some posts about the situation online and talking to another woman who had heard a different version of the story. That woman had apparently seen a local Facebook group discussion about Cheryl's dinner drama and mentioned that there had been a police report. When Brenda confronted Cheryl about it, Cheryl brushed her off and said that I was overreacting and trying to humiliate her publicly. But something didn't sit right, so Brenda started looking into it. That's when she realized Cheryl hadn't just lied about the dinner. She had a history of doing similar things to other people. I sat there reading the email 3 times, my hands tightening around the edge of the desk. All the humiliation, the stress, the damage Cheryl had caused. It wasn't just about one night. It was part of a pattern. I took a deep breath and wrote back to Brenda, asking if she would be willing to give a formal statement about what she knew. To my surprise, she replied within minutes. She said she absolutely would. The next morning, Brenda came by the restaurant. She was nervous, dressed in casual clothes, without the glamour she'd had that night. She brought printed copies of text messages between her and Cheryl, messages that made my stomach twist. In one of them, Cheryl had told her not to make a big deal about the dinner because Mark's rich now, he can afford it. In another, she bragged that family perks have their advantages. She had even written that my restaurant was basically a front for investors, and that he's rolling in money anyway. It's not like he'll notice a small dinner tab. It was all there, in writing. Every manipulation, every lie, every calculated attempt to make herself look innocent while making me seem greedy. Brenda handed everything over, and I immediately forwarded the copies to the detective who had handled the original report. I explained that Cheryl had not only refused to pay, but had deliberately misled her friends into thinking the dinner was free, effectively using my restaurant to scam them too. The detective responded within an hour, saying they'd add the new evidence to the ongoing investigation. Then came the part that stunned me most. He mentioned that there was now a formal fraud case being built against Cheryl. That word hit differently. Fraud. It wasn't just a family dispute anymore. It wasn't just her being manipulative or cheap. It was criminal. As it turned out, my case had opened a much bigger can of worms. Over the next few days, more information surfaced. Cheryl hadn't just tried to scam me. She had been doing this for years. The detective explained that they had started looking into her financial records after my original complaint and found several inconsistencies. Payments to businesses that were later disputed, invoices that never got paid, and reports from small vendors who had eerily similar stories. Cheryl would show up, act like a big spender, order expensive services or products, and then come up with an excuse not to pay. Sometimes she'd claim it was a misunderstanding. Other times she'd say she was waiting for funds to clear. If anyone pressed too hard, she'd switch tactics, accuse them of mistreating her, claim emotional distress, or threaten legal action until they backed off. Her trail of deceit stretched across restaurants, salons, event planners, and even a local florist who said Cheryl had commissioned a massive memorial arrangement for my father's funeral and then ghosted them after it was delivered. Apparently, the florist had written it off as a loss because she didn't want drama with a grieving widow. When the police started connecting the dots, they found more and more people who had fallen for the same act. The news started to spread quietly among the local business community. One of my suppliers mentioned it to me in passing, saying that the department was asking questions about a woman with a pattern of unpaid bills and false claims. It was surreal hearing it from someone outside my circle, like the whole thing was finally being dragged into the light after years of being hidden in the shadows. And then, the real twist came. One of Cheryl's victims recognized her from the news and reached out. Yesterday morning started like any other. I got to the restaurant early before the breakfast rush and started my usual routine, checking inventory, reviewing the schedule, making sure everything was running smoothly. The air was still quiet, the kind of peaceful silence that only exists before a kitchen wakes up. I poured myself a cup of coffee, opened my laptop, and began sorting through emails. Then I saw the subject line from one of my managers. "You'll want to see this." It included a link to a local news site. I clicked it, and there she was, Cheryl, my stepmother. The woman who had spent years manipulating, lying, and conning her way through life. The headline read, "Local woman arrested in multi-business fraud scheme." Below it was a screenshot from a video. Cheryl was being escorted out of a police precinct, her hands cuffed behind her back, wearing oversized sunglasses and a blazer like she was still trying to convince the world she was on her way to brunch instead of jail. Even as she walked past the reporters, she tilted her chin up, almost smiling. It looked like she still believed she could talk her way out of it. According to the report, Cheryl had been charged with multiple counts of fraud and theft by deception. Investigators had uncovered more than $40,000 in scams targeting small businesses around town. Restaurants, boutiques, event planners, salons, people who had trusted her word. The report said she had used fake stories, emotional manipulation, and even counterfeit documents to avoid paying bills or to open credit lines under other people's names. The kicker was that she had used her own friends as references on those fake applications. Some of the women who used to drink wine with her and laugh at her jokes suddenly found themselves getting calls from credit companies about accounts they'd never opened. That was when they turned on her. The article mentioned that several of her friends had gone to the police once they realized what she had done. They'd cooperated with investigators, providing messages, emails, and signed statements. Some of them even expressed guilt for defending her during the incident at my restaurant. It was strange to see the same women who had once sided with her now publicly disowning her, calling her a master manipulator and a liar who used everyone around her. It was surreal, almost cinematic, watching her entire empire of deceit collapse. I watched the news clip 3 times, not out of satisfaction, but out of disbelief. There she was, Cheryl Bennett, the self-proclaimed socialite, being led out of a courthouse in handcuffs. The reporter's voice said that she had been denied bail until her arraignment because the judge considered her a flight risk. I sat back in my chair, staring at the paused frame of her face. For the first time, she didn't look powerful or untouchable. She looked tired, hollow, like all the years of pretending had finally caught up to her. I thought I would feel angry. I thought I'd want to celebrate, to tell everyone that justice had finally been served. But I didn't feel any of that. What I felt instead was a deep, heavy exhaustion. Years of tension seemed to settle all at once. It wasn't triumph. It was relief that I didn't have to carry her shadow around anymore. After closing that night, I went home and poured myself a drink. The apartment was quiet except for the hum of the fridge. I sat on the couch and scrolled through some old photos I hadn't looked at in years. Then I found one that stopped me cold. It was a picture of my dad and me from when I was 19. Back then, I was running a tiny pop-up food stand at a street fair, cooking burgers on a rusty grill I'd borrowed from a friend. My dad was standing, next to me, holding one of the burgers, grinning like I'd just won a Michelin star. He was proud of me even when there wasn't much to be proud of yet. I stared at that photo for a long time. My dad had believed in people, even the ones who didn't deserve it. He believed in Cheryl until the day he died, convinced she just needed love and patience. I used to resent him for that, for not seeing what she really was, but now, I think he just didn't want to admit that someone he loved could be so selfish. Looking at his smile in that picture, I could almost hear him laughing at how everything had turned out. I whispered under my breath, "You'd get a kick out of this, old man." It struck me then how different my life had become. I had spent years thinking success would feel like money or recognition, but it didn't. It felt like freedom, the kind that comes from knowing you built something real, something honest, without needing to hurt anyone to get it. I had surrounded myself with people who cared, not because of what I could give them, but because they respected what I stood for. My kitchen crew, my managers, the regular customers who came in every week, they were my real family now. They showed up, they supported me, and when they sat at my tables, they always paid their bills. The next morning, I walked into the restaurant and saw my staff laughing over breakfast, the smell of fresh coffee filling the air. I stood there for a moment, just taking it all in. It hit me that family isn't always blood, and it isn't always who raised you. Sometimes it's the people who stand beside you when things fall apart. The ones who show up on time, who do their jobs, who respect your work and your boundaries. Those are the people who matter. As for Cheryl, I realized that her story was already over. There would be court hearings, statements, legal battles, maybe even a conviction, but none of that really mattered anymore. She had spent her entire life pretending to be someone she wasn't. Wealthy, sophisticated, powerful. In the end, all that pretending had caught up with her. The woman who used to brag about her connections was now sitting in a cell, probably still trying to convince someone that it was all a misunderstanding. I don't hate her anymore. I don't even pity her. I just feel sorry that she wasted her life trying to cheat her way through it. My father used to say that hard work was the one bill you could never dodge. Watching her downfall, I understood exactly what he meant. As I locked up that night, I walked past the photo wall in the dining area, pictures of my staff, happy customers, the grand opening ribbon cutting. I thought about how far things had come since the days when I was washing dishes and sleeping on couches. Cheryl had tried to tear me down, but in the end, she only showed me how strong I'd become. Some people spend their whole lives trying to get something for nothing. Cheryl was one of them. But life has a way of collecting its debt sooner or later. I guess she finally learned what happens when you try to dine and dash through life.